Aldo, we're live.
Hi, Lewis.
Hey,
Yes, we are back.
how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Really good, really good, really good. So this week we have the pleasure of speaking with Glenn Martin, talent acquisition superstar, who was our last live podcast guest. So
Absolutely
really
great to
cool to
have
have him
Glenn
back.
back.
Let's patch Glenn in. Hey, Glenn.
Hey guys, I was just looking for the superstar you mentioned on your intro. I have no idea who you're referring to.
Hi, Glenn.
Good to-
Welcome.
Welcome,
Thanks,
welcome.
guys. Good to be back with both of you. Like I said,
No, great.
really enjoyed the live podcast. That was wicked.
We'll get back there soon. We'll definitely
We'll
get back
get
there
back to
soon.
that.
It feels like the weather's getting warmer and everyone's getting a little bit more positive and the virus is chilling
Yeah,
out a little bit.
it's literally summer in London. I have just the sunshine above, and it feels great.
Yeah,
It's good. It's good.
no
So
feeling.
for this show, we're going to talk virtual hiring, candidate experience, and then think a little bit about what the recruitment process might look like going forward. So some really good stuff there.
Big topics.
It's great. It's great. So, what's been your experience? I know you're hiring at the moment, and
Yeah.
really in it. So,
Yeah, totally. I mean, in terms of, so this is a really interesting one. We were chatting about it before the show, right? I think some companies have really experienced challenges due to kind of obviously social isolation and how they've had to kind of change and pivot their hiring experience and their hiring process. And actually, the company I've been working with, it's a fintech. For them, it's not been a major change at all. They had pretty well embedded kind of social collaboration tools. The actual hiring process actually flips quite well into a virtual environment because a lot of the team and the people that are interviewing actually understand whilst there isn't that kind of physical shared space, how to kind of project yourself, how to make that human connection, and actually what you're looking to discover through the process of an interview. I think they index really well on that. And I wonder whether other companies have fared as well. Because as I was saying to you before the show, man, I have this real kind of, it's a bugbear in terms of the way people refer to remote working or virtual hiring, as if implying that it's not the full experience that it should be, and that kind of physical, basically that kind of physical location is and being in the same physical location is the key to the decision making, is absolutely the essential bit, and I don't think it is. I don't believe it is.
Did you not feel that you miss something not meeting someone face to face? Like, you get that kind of, everyone says, I'm such a good judge of character, I read people's body language and you shake their hand and all of that kind of stuff.
I think, the experience of being in the same physical location was missed, but I don't believe it detracted from my experience of them as individuals, getting to understand them and understand their motivators, why they want a particular opportunity. And I personally believe it didn't in any way kind of inhibit actually the interviewing process. And if anything, I think it actually made both me and perhaps the individual interviewing more aware that they had to put a bit more kind of effort and emphasis in to kind of project themselves. You know what I mean?
But eventually,
sorry,
Glenn, I was just thinking that eventually you have to meet them in person through the process. I mean, eventually, do you think that you have to get like a quick idea of the person that you are interviewing, or you think it can all go virtual?
100% virtual. That's what we've done with the fintech that I'm working with. So we've hired people 100% virtual. So at some point when kind of the kind of social isolation restrictions are gone, we will meet that person in person. But that hasn't inhibited us hiring them. And we've onboarded 5 now people virtually. So it's cool.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And should you feel that you can still effectively feel what this person's about, assess their fit into the organization, all of those things virtually? Like, are you completely confident that you're as an effective recruiter?
So let me flip that back on you, right? So if you have an interview framework, a set of values that you're interviewing against, and that's the criteria that you're assessing that person against, what's the difference between having that conversation virtually or having that conversation in person? Does the framework or the assessment framework change at all from the in-person to the virtual? Because if it does, then okay, you've got to reevaluate two different types of kind of interviewing frameworks then, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, ultimately, no, you're right. Completely right. I mean, if you've got a framework, if you're interviewing against certain criteria, absolutely the same. It just feels like for some organizations that we hire for, I mean, some like you are doing it virtually, others aren't. Others are doing it a little bit. So it's been quite a mix. And the key, the thing that people are saying is, I want to meet them. You know, like the video is great, and I'm all for it. And I think it will be a massively integral part of the recruitment process. It just feels like as we maybe start to get out of lockdown, people feel more comfortable meeting someone.
I mean, we are, you know, we're kind of kinetic beings, aren't we? We like to be in the presence of people. It's, you know, there is a kind of positive vibe from that. But I anchoring an interview process in the need to physically meet somebody in person. My question is why? Quantify for me what more you're going to get.
Even reading the body language. You think that's a component, a key component of the interviewing process? Reading people's body language that tells you a bit more about that person as opposed to through the virtual. I mean,
okay. Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate, Aldo. Right? If we're sitting here now, you can see my arms, my chest, my head, everything like those lines. Are you gonna read anything more into my body language from the waist down?
Well, apparently, let me tell you that according to the studies, the best way to interview someone is by having a chair and not having a table in between, so you can read through from head to toe. But there are some articles out now about virtual meetings fatigue. Do you think this is happening? Suffering from fatigue out of all these virtual meetings?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely the same. If you have lots of meetings when you're in person, you can experience the same fatigue if you have lots of meetings virtually. So I think it's similar. You know, if you go into multiple meetings, then you're mentally going to be kind of drained, I think, because it requires renewed energy, you know, mind space, intellectual horsepower for each different meeting, and whether that's in person or virtually, I think you can experience the same fatigue.
Yeah, the thing I find, and I was I can't remember which psychologist I was reading, to be honest, but I'll stick it in the show notes afterwards. But this lady was saying that the Zoom stuff and the virtual meetings and stuff are great, but often it leaves people with like a sense of what she called it, grieving. But like something missing, and what she said is often like you get this great conversation, but then when you leave, you realize what you're missing, which is, you know, you can't shake someone's hand, give them a cuddle, you know, like. So I think it will be interesting to see once we're out of lockdown, like whether this virtual hiring will continue or and be a main part of the recruitment process, or a part of, you know, maybe the first interview. And
well, you know, one of our clients on this note, Lewis, one of our clients was in this meeting and was sitting in a large room, and through the interview was wearing a mask. You cannot. I don't know if you, Glenn, would you prefer to have an interview face to face wearing a mask, or rather have a virtual meeting?
I think it's down to choice in terms of, and back to Lewis's point, right? There is, I think, going to be a temptation by a lot of companies to default back to the way that they used to recruit and hire and the process they used to have.
Yeah.
But actually, what they're probably not taking into account is the choice of the candidate and how they would like and what kind of interview process they would like to experience. Because to your point, Aldo, there might be some individuals that, don't want to come into London. They don't want to come into London until, kind of July, mid-July, when, a lot of other people have gone back to sort of see what happens. Actually, some people, from a time efficiency perspective, would prefer the virtual interview process because it actually allows them a lot more flexibility. So I think actually it's really about the choice of the individual. You need to take that into account, the candidate's choice. But in terms of, sitting in front of somebody with a kind of a mask on or not, it's entirely down to them. I'll respect whatever they want to do.
True. We've got a question from Nicholas Lakeland on this. Nicholas.
Yeah.
Employment lawyer. So he says, doesn't meeting people.
I'm not saying anything.
He's writing this down as we speak. Doesn't meeting people give you a more complete picture of the person? Remotely, can't candidates put up a better front, which you are trying to get around?
Okay. So
can they be? They can act. Essentially.
What I infer from that is, are we questioning individuals' integrity to be different virtually than they are in person? I go with a view of trust, that who I'm meeting virtually and who I meet in person is the same person. I think if you're a very effective interviewer, you will be able to get round the front that is perceived to be there. And I think if you really, index high on EQ, you can very comfortably get past that, perhaps that initial kind of facade or their perception of what they should do in an interview, right? And that's your responsibility as an interviewer to set the scene, set the context, make them comfortable, and think about the type of conversation that you want to set up with them, and how you want to make them feel comfortable, because you want to see the real person. So for me, as I said, I go with trust. I trust in people's integrity, and I'm very confident that you can set up an interview to get a real sense of that person, whether it's virtually or kind of face to face.
Fine. And are you doing anything differently to make people feel comfortable in his interview process? Because we want it to be fair, obviously, and give people the best chance and space to be their best selves. Is there anything that you'd advise people to do to enable that?
Yeah. Well, all of us know about the pre-interview, the interview, and the post-interview, right? The pre-interview is that initial opening of how you kind of feel somebody relaxed, how you kind of start with some initial chat that just around, whatever's in the news, the weather, and ultimately kind of how their day's been going, et cetera, et cetera. You want to be able to basically set that conversation up and set the boundaries of how relaxed you are. So therefore that essentially really should, sort of project onto them. They when you come into an interview, I think if you're an interviewee, you're immediately trying to read the interviewer, right? What kind of interview is this going to be? Kind of what kind of context is it? Is it quite relaxed? Is it quite formal? And it's your responsibility again as an interviewer to really set the context for that. Am I doing anything differently? No, not in terms of what I'm talking about, how I'm basically setting that interview up. But actually, and I'll say this, I may name drop through this show, but it's purely as a reference point for people to kind of go and check this out. So that kind of friend and kind of collaborator of mine, Gail Sixsmith, works on your projection, your body language in virtual and in person. Former actress, but now a coach. And she actually can give you some really clear things that you can do to project yourself, which I think you can say verbally, but actually how you communicate that physically as well, making that connection can really help in a virtual environment.
Definitely. What about dress? So you're matching your background, which is wonderful.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Ali's in a shirt, I'm in a t-shirt. Are you finding people are still dressing up for an interview?
Or maybe it could be a bit more relaxed when you're doing a virtual interview as when you walk inside an office. I mean, you're more in your comfort zone, right?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've experienced both. Some people have dressed very formally for an interview. Some have, just dressed very relaxed. I guess for me personally, it's not important. I don't necessarily index higher somebody that's dressed in a kind of suit formally to somebody that's sitting there in a t-shirt, because for me it's about the content of the conversation. But to your question, I've experienced both basically. Some people that have really set up the kind of backdrop and everything, being really conscious of kind of, you know, the whole screen that somebody's seeing. And some people just dropped in their kitchen with their cat walking along, and we just started to go, you know.
Well, I mean, you've got to think about it. Like, go on, Aldo.
Yes, I think it's a nice thing. Is one of the positive things is that it gives a human context, because you get a bit of an insight of where you live. Things like I would analyze people's background as well. You have a very lovely wallpaper, Lewis. You have a very nice painting, Glenn, on the back. Makes me feel a bit like I'm in Costa Rica. I have some books on my background. You know, it just like gives you a bit of an insight of people's, you know, own lives. So I think that's a very positive thing.
It is nice. It is nice. A lot of things to think about, really are. And I think ultimately you're right. It's going to be more and more an integral part of the recruitment process. For some of the stuff we've been doing, so it's a board level search, leadership roles, we're still finding that ultimately the clients want some in-person interaction at some point in the process. So that'll be interesting to see. You know, we were already doing a lot of virtual interviews with international searchers. Obviously now with local UK ones, again, the virtual interviewing, but it's going to be very interesting to see how it develops. What we're interested to know is once you've hired 5 people virtually, who's now owning the onboarding process?
So you've kind of preempted a topic we're discussing on Friday, actually, which is who owns the kind of onboarding, recruitment or HR? As a recruiter, clearly I'm going to say recruitment mainly, because it makes sense for that kind of continuity. It's going to be biased, Aldo, right? Because I think recruitment is definitely part of the people function. Recruitment doesn't stop when somebody walks in the door, in my opinion, right? So the onboarding piece is definitely part of that. Recruitment can certainly own that. I think what you need to remember is it's not in isolation, right? So, and it depends on the size of the company, right? So I work largely with kind of startups and scale ups. So usually I'm either the one recruiter, and you tend to work in conjunction with, in partnership, should I say, with kind of ops and HR to a degree. And actually, and this is one thing I will say, right? Never underestimate the value of a fantastic operations or office manager. I'm working with one at the moment, Lauren Price. I'll give her a shout out because she's awesome. Right. She has contributed massively to that, you know, the partnership around onboarding our new employees. So I think it's, you know, depending on the size of the company, recruitment with support from office or ops, and HR will probably pick up where you really go into the induction piece. So induct them into their first day, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So a real team game.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be different in larger scale enterprise companies, but certainly in startups and scale ups, you do need to, you know, work really well in partnership with kind of office management, ops, and HR. Yeah.
And then how have you integrated them into the team? Because obviously, you know, leaders and managers are in the same boat, right? I mean, we're all just feeling our way around. And how are you finding people, you know, welcome to the team, join the virtual pub quiz we've got on Friday at 4, whatever. I mean, are they doing anything that's really cool, or?
So the socializing is important, and that's no different to if they were joining in person, walking in the office on their first day. And I think it's really important to make sure that they're introduced to their immediate team, make sure they're introduced to the kind of teams that they'll be working with and interacting with. So that might actually end up being probably their first week. And to your point, Aldo, maybe a bit of virtual meeting overload, but actually what it does do, it immediately socializes them, gets them into the collaboration channels, talking, exchanging information, introductions with them, with fellow colleagues. And actually, things like the virtual pub quiz and virtual coffees become really important part of that. And I think certainly in terms of when they join that first day, you know, you want to be able to ensure that the sort of team are probably reaching out and contacting that person before their first day to say, hey, you know, looking forward to you coming on board, and just kind of really sort of being welcoming. And again, that's no different to in-person to virtual, and both can be done equally as well.
And I'm thinking one question could be like, if you have at the end of a process 3 or 4 favorite candidates, and they all 4 of them have the same quality, same skills, they are great on the virtual interviews, they've been great. What does that, do you think you would have to meet them in person in order to make the final decision? Or what could be the final decision point in order to select the most suitable one?
Well, firstly, if you've got 4 exceptional candidates you've got to make a decision over, that sounds good in the first place. And certainly if you've worked with an agency for that, you need to up the fee because they've done an exceptional job. But to your point, I think if you're looking for a deciding factor, I think actually, one of the things that we've actually used virtually was a panel-based presentation. So, and this is quite rapid, right? So you give them a case study, you give them kind of 48 hours to put that case study together, put that presentation together, and then present to a mixed panel of people that haven't actually, or not everybody has been involved in the interview process, because we're looking for a different audience participation, a different audience input. And then the panel's briefed on actually what to essentially kind of look for and assess for. There's certain things that we may need to want to index in more, dig deep into a little bit more. And I think that can help as a real differentiator. It may add another stage to the process, but ultimately, if you've got 4 fantastic candidates, you owe them the respect of ensuring you've done your full due diligence to ensure you make the right decision at the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, we've got a process at the moment where the final stage is a presentation as well. It's a good way to do it. I think you can hire. You're right. Just circling back, it's a very effective way to hire. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can read a lot into how they set that virtual presentation up.
Yeah.
So ultimately, say for instance, the software they use, how they present, how they get you to interact as a panel to the presentation. These things, it's not just the presentation, the content in isolation. It's actually, how do they set this up? How do they make it an engaging experience for you? And actually, that can be a real differentiator as well.
Absolutely, and make sure you have fast fiber optic broadband, because you don't want your interview, you don't want your thing going off. So
totally.
It's interesting. Who are you finding now? So one feedback I've had is that when you get hired now, it's quite mechanical. So the difference between, like, if you're face to face, I think you make friends quicker. You know, like, I can see you, I can make friends with you and stuff. And a lot of people are finding it a bit mechanical. It's, here's your job, here are the tasks, crack on. Okay. Have you had the same experience, or what are you finding?
Well, I personally no. I don't think it's mechanical. I think, you know, recruitment is the people team. And it's our responsibility to make it a people-based experience. For me, no, I don't find it transactional. And good, I mean, you know, look, I'm not gonna be kind of critical, but any companies that are finding, or any perhaps candidates that are finding a company's process quite mechanical, kind of tells you a little bit about that business and perhaps how they value their employees, how they value the kind of recruitment process, and how they value the candidate experience. I mean, for me, that would be something I'd be looking to kind of question and maybe assess in my final decision making if I were a candidate. You know, for me personally, I think it's always about putting the people first in the interview process. So making sure the hiring managers are, you know, front and center, their personalities are really out in front of the brand, and making sure that the candidate really experiences that. Yeah.
Well, that leads us beautifully. So the candidate experience. So we've talked really about from a company perspective, and so it'd be interesting to see what are your thoughts on the experience for the candidate? Are they enjoying this virtual interviewing? or do you think you'd prefer to get an opportunity to meet someone face to face?
I think certainly the anecdotal feedback that I'm kind of getting from people that have gone through our process is they've really enjoyed it. 2, they've really got a very good sense of the business and the people in the business. 3, I think they found it time efficient, that they haven't had to travel places. And actually 4, whilst I think they would like to maybe experience the office space, I don't think that has actually been a detractor from their final decision to accept the offer that we've made them. And like let's say the 3 of us were kind of on Twitter earlier, and Ben Geldhall kind of pinged out the candidate experience sort of framework, which we can drop into the sort of chat channel afterwards, which actually for me had 2 really key things in it in terms of the brand awareness. And I'll just read them off now because I've got them in front of me.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Transparent view of the organization, mission, story, and experience, the why, and engaged and motivated employees promoting their experiences through content shared via relevant, accessible platforms and events. That's candidate expectations. Now, it's going to be more magnified now, right? So possibly one of the first questions somebody might ask is, how did you treat your employees through the sort of COVID period? Did you furlough lots of them? Did you make lots of redundancies? How was what was the culture and the environment like through this kind of tough period? So there's going to be that question around, okay, what's it like internally, and actually how does that project externally in terms of the candidate's experience of the business when they go through that interview process? So I think that that one's a really interesting one for me.
I like that. I think we've lost Aldo, so we're going to patch Aldo out. And then we'll continue, the 2 of us. Perfect. So no, I think it's interesting because I've had a lot of mixed feedback from different companies, or different candidates going through different interview processes about how, I don't really call it kind of not tech savvy, but how quickly they've moved to adapt to the kind of the COVID era, let's say, using technology, trying to get their story out. We're seeing quite a lot of people do the video casts, the live shows. I know you're a veteran of the live show, 150 and counting or something like that. So do you think, what are your thoughts on all of that stuff?
I think it's great that individuals are feeling empowered to kind of share their opinions and want to start conversations around different aspects of kind of the whole sort of talent sphere. For me, I think it's great. I think it's positive. I don't think there's an overload of that kind of content being produced. Actually, I welcome it, because the more transparency from the recruitment industry as a whole, the better, because it allows businesses, it allows certainly candidates as well to understand what we do and how much effort and how much graft and how much passion we put into what we do. So for me, I'm big tick in a box. I'm an advocate.
I think it's great, because more and more now you find people want to join. Like, why does someone want to join a company versus another one? Obviously, is their career going to be better served at the new firm versus the old? But also more and more people want to hear about green credentials, like, how environmentally friendly are they? What's their carbon footprint like? But then also you buy into the storytelling. If you see the CEO being really authentic and genuine and sharing his view online, I think it's brilliant. It makes it all that much more human.
Definitely, the sustainability is key. So what I was indexing on there is what recruiters are doing for their companies in terms of projecting that message. I think businesses definitely. I think probably the only thing that will die away quite quickly on kind of LinkedIn feeds and Twitter feeds is pictures of Zoom meetings. Kind of look, it's kind of like it's almost replaced that picture of the team round the table at a lunch type thing. You know what I mean? Now it's a team in a Zoom meeting, which is great. I'm pleased that everybody's utilising technology, but to be honest, so is everybody else. So it's not particularly unique in any way, shape, or form. Show me something that isn't perhaps something that everybody else is doing, right? I've seen the pub quizzes, I've seen the workouts, I've seen all kinds of things like that. So it's good that people are really sort of collaborating and connecting, but actually it's not a differentiator anymore to go, oh, look at us on a Zoom meeting.
You've got to try and differentiate. The Zoom thing's done now. I'm more interested in the post-COVID era. I maybe sounds strange now, but I'm super excited for what's coming next. We talked about a few themes, that the virtual interviewing, what's that going to look like? The candidate experience, I think, still quite a bit of work to do. I think people are still, you've got to find your feet, I think, still a little bit, but that's getting better. So what do you think it's going to look like going forward now? Like, 6 months time.
Like you said, interesting times, right? First and foremost, remote working, or the option to work remotely, work from home. The myth around that being something that's kind of, you have to sign up for, or ultimately a company gives you 1 to 2 days a week, that sort of thing, because it might impact the business. That's gone. That's completely, COVID has completely it's destroyed that myth completely. And actually what it's done, it's forced leaders to rethink how they lead. And the good leaders, the really great leaders, will take the learnings from COVID and that experience and really accelerate their teams and their businesses forward. Perhaps the ones that might struggle a little bit more are the ones that want to default back to the way it was. So I think, in terms of recruitment, for me, what I would hope is that choice becomes an option for the candidate, and businesses are able to offer that choice in terms of how a person wants to go through an interview process. So if they want to be purely remote, there's almost a conversation around how that could look, and businesses will have the responsibility to create an experience that is consistent across whatever medium. I saw a Facebook post the other day, yesterday actually, in a group I think we're all in actually, and the chap sort of posted that his daughter applied for a job and effectively got requested for an interview, and she was like, oh look, is this interview going to be like via Zoom or in person? And this company came back and went, well, it's going to be in person. She was like, well, I prefer not to travel in at the moment. They were like, okay, well, we won't progress with the interview.
Oh really?
And it's like, what?
I have a question also in regards of the technology being used, Glenn, put in place. What will be the next thing after Zoom? Because it was Skype before, but I was actually speaking with a contact of mine, and in order to log in to Skype, you have to have an account. So Zoom just made it easier. Actually, is a chief technology officer was telling me this, the after Skype era, and it's very easy. It's very user friendly. Do you see any other platforms? I mean, what will be I imagine the future, because 5G is coming through, so we'll be able to see something like Star Wars, when you can see the hologram of a person popping up, and then you can read the whole body language, right? Because you just put like a device there, it'll pop out, your whole body would look like. I mean, that would be fantastic to have something like that in the future. You see something like that really happening?
I think well, what future technology will look like? I mean, that hologram element, I think, is definitely a possibility, but actually affordability is going to be a key play there, right? I'm not entirely sure a small scale London startup can afford that type of tech to interview their people. So I think there'll be that continued dependency on the types of platforms that are around now, like Zoom and Teams and kind of Blue Jeans and everything on those lines. And then, I think slightly more, and the interesting thing is slightly more informal channels, I think, have been used through this period as well, like Messenger, WhatsApp, etc., to kind of continue to conduct interviews and conversations. And whereas before they may not have been considered out of necessity, they are now a consideration, have been used, and hopefully people have experienced that it hasn't, again, detracted. Just because you're not on Zoom with a virtual background doesn't mean to say that the quality of the conversation across WhatsApp video is any less, or is different. You know what I mean?
On that point that you're talking about, I remember back some decades ago, I was watching these cartoons. I used to watch these cartoons called Messenger. If anyone remembers that, there was a part where they were talking virtually, and I thought as a kid, this is definitely a cartoon. This is sci-fi. This will never happen in the future. And now we're doing it like as the normal thing. So if this happened now, I imagine, I cannot even imagine what will happen in 10 years from now in terms of those virtual meetings.
It's crazy. I'll just say we've got some questions, so I thought let's just get on with a few of the questions. Thank you, Melody. So I think Melody works at Imperial College Business School. Cool. So she's interested to understand how recruiters will change the way they reach out to candidates and engage with future hires. And she says normally they advise their MBA students to try and meet recruiters for a coffee, for an initial chat. And she's asking, are we just going to be doing the same now over Skype, Zoom, or Teams?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think, so what she's probably looking to understand is actually how can these MBA students kind of get maybe a little bit more traction, a little bit more of a meaningful contact and kind of conversation with recruiters. I would say that's always dependent on the recruiter specifically, and how open they are to kind of engaging and doing something different. So whether that's a conversation that starts on WhatsApp, translates to a virtual kind of chat, and then to a face-to-face coffee. It's a good question. I can only talk for myself, to be fair, Lewis, and I would suggest that the more personal, the better. But that doesn't necessarily mean that in person increases the how personal that is.
Yeah, I mean, for me, being an executive search consultant, we are still meeting. Well, we've just started meeting again. Obviously, social distancing, one person at a time. But very this week we've just started doing walks with people. So we're meeting for a coffee, grab a little takeaway, have a little walk, walk around the city. So certainly for us, and obviously we're an agency, and Glenn is in-house. And so for us, I think we're going to be doing both. And we have been doing both anyway, but I think the virtual stuff is increasing because not everyone is fortunate enough to live close to whether it's London or a big city or their recruiter that they want to meet. So if it's not possible and you don't want to travel on the tube and the train and all of that stuff, then definitely I think Teams, Zoom, Google Hangouts, whatever is perfect. Or if you want a little coffee and a walk, then I think that's cool too. So it's going to be it's going to be mixed, I think, but that's our plan.
I was just going to come back to that MBA question because I was turning around in my mind when you were talking. I was like, in my experience, actually, when I'm in-house, when I'm pitched kind of by MBA students looking for an internship or they're looking for a job and that sort of thing, I'm always struck by the really formalized approach. And coming back to my point around it being personalized, it's like, look, and experienced recruiters know the value that an MBA candidate can bring to the table. And actually, experienced recruiters can read a CV and kind of assess the quality of that individual. The one thing that I'm looking for from those particular types of applicants is the why. What is your motivation for wanting to either work for this company, apply for this company? What do you think you can bring other than obviously your kind of MBA banner to this company? That's what I want to understand. And if that's done via a face-to-face coffee, over Zoom, over WhatsApp, whatever, I'm cool. But that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. That's what I'm trying to understand. That's
true. And I think, it's, for my advice to students, MBA students, people getting in, it's thinking about what's your story and what do you have to offer? Why should someone hire you? What value are you going to add? And look, it might be, and I know you did I think you did a poll on this on Twitter. I mean, when you don't have any work experience, you're hoping people are going to hire you for your potential, right? And so how do you get that across? And you don't get taught that at school. I don't know if you get taught it in an MBA in an MBA program, but it's just taking a moment and thinking about it. Like, why do they want to hire me? What's the story?
Yeah, exactly. So, and you can tell that as well over a video, right? You don't have to send me your kind of CV. You could ping me a CV with a short, 50-second video just to kind of introducing yourself and telling me why.
Yeah. So Maleh, again, I think it's worth addressing this because it's probably a big gripe of recruiters. She says a lot of the feedback from MBA students is that recruiters aren't interested in building a relationship and they just want a quick outcome. So ultimately, I think what Maleh's saying is that the recruiter will only meet you if there's an active role right now. And
it depends. It depends. If that's agency side, then perhaps it's a lot more transactional. But at the same token, don't put all recruiters in the same kind of bracket as that. I think there's definitely ones out there that like me, that want to kind of build relationships and look a lot more longer term in terms of how that relationship might be mutually beneficial.
Yeah, and I think also, like in every walk of life, there's different quality people in different industries, right? And so there's an awful lot of headhunters and recruiters around, and I think it's really just try and meet as many as you can. If they'll meet you, we'll do the virtual and network, because nowadays it's tricky to find a good role, and I think you've got to put in a lot of effort now. Like you've got to go meet people, virtually meet or in person, and just accept that some are going to be good and interested in making friends and others aren't. So
there's also the responsibility on to a degree on the candidate to research the recruitment market. Don't just see it as a channel. Research it, research the players in it, research the credibility of those players in it, and then perhaps look to build relationships with the ones that come across as really credible. It's a two-way thing, right?
And Glenn, do you think that given the situation, will it be easier for foreign professionals to apply for jobs in London? I mean, we were used to the process, and maybe it will be great to listen from your side within fintech, that you tend to have this interviewing process over the video, and then you invite that person to come to the offices to London and have the series of interviews. Well, now you think it's going to be easier for foreign professionals to apply for jobs in London?
Good question.
Great question,
really good question. Because when I think about, I mean, there's so many kind of known unknowns, isn't it, in relation to how kind of Brexit is truly going to play out, how that will impact on the types of visas that people can apply for, because they've already made change to the entrepreneurial visas, haven't they? There used to be 3 different types of entrepreneur visas. Now it's the exceptional talent visa. So there's been changes in relation to how talented individuals can access kind of visas or then be sponsored. I would hope that foreign talent's interest in working in the UK doesn't diminish, and I would hope that companies really step up and take on the responsibility of having almost their pathways to engage, sponsor talent when that right person comes up, and not do it retrospectively. So actually invest in and put it on your roadmap that we need to look into our framework of, if we want to sponsor, if we want to take on individuals with a visa, how do we do that? And are we set up for it? And what sort of timelines are we looking at? And build that into a recruitment process, right? So at the very beginning, the recruiter knows, okay, if we've got somebody that's just about to go into the interview loop, but actually they're going to need sponsorship, we need to really start thinking now about the plan and the timeline for that person, if indeed we end up offering them. So it becomes something that's considered all the way through, not just at the point of offer or thereafter. So to your point, Aldo, I really do hope that foreign talent doesn't or stop. It doesn't stop. Kind of looking to apply and work in the UK, because that would be awful for the UK economy.
Yeah,
definitely. Awesome. Well, I think
thanks for those.
Great place to end. Yeah. Glenn, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Loads of great stuff. We'll get you back in again.
So great to have you in.
Yeah, and although I love meeting you virtually, I do look forward to meeting you face to face soon.
Yeah, it'll be great, man. It'll be great. We'll grab breakfast, or I'll come around to the
100%.
office and Aldo can bring in some of that superb coffee.
Yes. We'll have a nice cup.
Breakfast will be.
We'll do it. We'll do really well. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Take care.